If you're tuning into this episode, congratulations on navigating a very tumultuous season and making the fantasy playoffs. Or maybe you're just a hardcore IDP degenerate like us. Either way, welcome in. I'm Jeff Pomazal, and welcome to the IDP After Show Week 15 preview episode. You're in for a real treat this week. Joining me is Mike Woellert, who is a cornerstone of the IDP world, and he's here to help us get our lineup set for an all-important Week 15. Mike and I are going to be breaking down why we like Jaelan Phillips as a must start this week, as well as why Devin Bush might be a sneaky start in Week 15. We're also going to be telling you this week that even though Nick Emmanwori might look good on paper and his box score stats have been looking good, this might be the week he cools off. Finally, find out this holiday season which list Micah Parsons landed on for Week 15. If that sounds like something that you and your fantasy teams could use, sit back, listen in, and let's get after it on this episode of the IDP After Show.
This is the IDP After Show.
All right, Mike, before we get started tonight, I want to kind of pick your brain a little bit. Is setting your lineup in the playoffs different for you than in the regular season, or do you kind of like just do the same that got you there?
For the most part, I'm doing the same. I'm dancing with the guys that brought me there, so I'm not doing a whole lot of tinkering. I'm not doing a whole lot of overthinking. I'm not, okay, this linebacker doesn't have a great matchup, but he was my LB1. Am I gonna really bench him over an LB 4 or 5 that I picked up on waivers a few weeks ago? I guess I'd rather go down with the ship than bench a guy that I know will produce and be like, okay, I just left my LB1 on the bench and he went off for 12 tackles and 20 some odd points. And this guy with a really good matchup who may not be as talented only got me 6. So at least I know I set in my opinion, the best possible lineup. So I don't do a whole lot of tinkering. I don't do a whole lot of overthinking. If I've got similar guys on my defensive line, I might just kind of take a look at the offensive line matchups and just kind of see how those shake out. But for the most part, I'm setting the lineup with the guys for the most part that got me to the playoffs.
And I know you mentioned like the linebackers. Is that true for all positions in IDP, or is it vary a little bit when you get to the secondary or defensive line matchup for you?
Secondary, it's I'll just honestly, it's for the most part, I'll play matchups a little bit more with like my DBs or my safeties, my cornerbacks for the most part. Those I'll probably look at a little bit more, but no, the DBs are a little bit more matchup based. But linebackers for the most part, like if I've got a linebacker group of say Jamian Sherwood, Carson Swessinger, and maybe Terrell Dodson, and then maybe I had Isaiah McDuffie, and then maybe I picked up Christian Roseboom, maybe I picked up another guy. I'm basically taking those first 3, and if it's a 3 or 4, I'm definitely going with like Swessinger, Sherwood, and Dodson as my main guys. And and then maybe my LB4, I might look into matchups a little bit more. But like if it's like 3 linebackers, I'm taking my top 3 guys.
And it makes a lot of sense too, because that's probably how you constructed your roster during your draft. You fade the DBs till the end. That was a streaming option anyway. So you stream to get to the playoffs, and you're going to stream through the playoffs with that position. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
Wednesday is like Christmas morning for me because you drop your weekly projections and things like that. First of all, how much time does it take you to do those each week? And then when you build those, what kind of goes into that build?
Typically, I'll start honestly with my projections. As soon as Thursday night football kicks off and is over, I begin the next week. So I know I'll establish kind of like my baseline for my projections starting into the weekend. So if anything happens on a Sunday, or obviously if any injuries happen, or if anything, I notice anything kind of out of the ordinary, I'll make some minor tweaks, make some minor adjustments. But yeah, I mean, I start my projections for that Friday after Thursday night football kicks off. Now, especially now that we're so deep in the league, for the most part, trends are trends, stats are stats. For the most part, there isn't a whole lot of fluctuation at this point. Obviously the beginning of the season, you had some ups and downs, but now it's like, okay, they're pretty much on for the most part on cruise control. It's not like I copy and paste, but I basically will just take a look. Okay, here's the good matches for the linebackers, and then I'll do the same thing for the defensive line. I'll take a look. I look at those defensive line, offensive line matchups. I kind of take a look at the tackles, see who's on a hot streak, who's kind of low. I kind of take a look at those last 3 or 4 weeks because that kind of tells you who's on a good hot streak, who's on a cold streak. And then now that we're getting in the divisional matchups a little bit more, I'll take a look at those first go around. So, what did they do in that first game? Obviously, at the beginning of the season is a little bit different, but like Cincinnati and for example, Cincinnati and Baltimore basically played each other back to back, or are playing each other for the most part back to back. So you kind of get an idea. Okay, they're going to be close in numbers, but now, like I said, it takes me, I start Friday. It takes me probably about an hour to do linebacker, and then probably anywhere between an hour and a half to 2 hours to do defensive line and defensive backs.
Okay. So definitely a labor of love, constantly 24/7, always tweaking probably too, right?
Yeah, that's why I hate injuries, and I hate injuries. I hate other things. It's like, ugh.
Yeah.
So, but not too many. It doesn't require too many tweaks.
Yeah. When you're looking at who is your best call this year? Like you just obviously Carson Schlesinger, but that was a little biasy right there with that. But who is that guy you were like, oh yeah, I knew this guy was gonna nail it, and he was the guy that I hit. And
oh God, I will be honest, when I do all of my writing, when I do all of my projections, I have no bias. I remove all of the bias. So I honestly believed Carson Schlesinger was going to be a really good tackler and a really good producer in Cleveland. So when I look at his projection, I'm probably going to come pretty close to nailing his total tackle. I'm not going to look at the solo to assist because those are a little bit off, but I think I projected him at 146. I think he's probably going to come close to that. But I haven't really looked at, who I nailed, but I'll be honest. I think I'm going to be pretty close on Schlesinger for the most part. But as far as, boy, I haven't really looked to see who my big hits are. I can tell you the misses.
Oh, that's easy.
No, that's easy. I know right off the bat. Daiyan Henley, I totally missed. Zaire Franklin, totally missed. Those two right off the bat were just are total misses. I think I'm pretty close though on Nick Bolton. I thought Nick Bolton was going to return kind of to form how he was over the last couple of seasons. He'd been injured the last couple of seasons, but I had a feeling he was going to, kind of have a good return, kind of a return to form, and I think he kind of has. So I liked Bolton headed into the season. So if I was going to say some, just off tops, I'd probably say Bolton was a pretty good projection. But yeah, I know a lot of us probably are going to say Daiyan Henley we missed. 50% of his production, it's just insane what his drop off this year.
Well, it won't be the last time we mention his name on the show tonight either. But last thing here, Mike, when you do those, do you look back at the end of the season, look back and kind of look at things that maybe you hit or missed on to as a learning exercise, like Zaire Franklin, looking back on it now, we got a new defensive coordinator in there with Lou Amaromo, maybe that was going to kind of change things for him. He didn't have a good running mate for a long time of the season. And last year we saw EJ Speed and him just eat, and that now we've seen Jermaine Pratt here, and now they're both starting to play like the linebackers of the Colts that we're used to seeing. So is there a little bit of looking back and kind of learning from that for you?
Yeah, probably. There will be. I try not to look back because it just seems like each season is its own.
Yep.
And the NFL is awesome in that last year doesn't matter.
Yep.
It just doesn't. You can say, yeah, he did this.
Last week doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. Last week doesn't matter. That's the great thing about the NFL. It truly is a week to week. It's not a 17 game season. It is 17 1 week seasons.
Yep.
Or 18 1 week seasons. So, you kind of take a look and okay, maybe you'll adjust and be like, okay, in this defense, this is what happened.
Yep.
So, take a look at that. It'll a little bit matter. But, when you had someone like Zaire, it's like, all right, he had back-to-back consecutive seasons of monster tackle numbers. I mean, is a scheme change really going to make that big of a difference? I mean, this guy was a high volume tackler. So, I'll look back and, adjust and take a look. But yeah, no, it's one of those seasons. Previous season doesn't matter.
Yeah. Well, let's get into this most important week 15. So our listeners who are listening obviously are, doing well. They're in the playoffs looking for some help this week, or they're just true degens, and those are the types of people that we love to have around. So, Mike, who's a defensive lineman that's got you a little excited for week 15?
Yeah, I love the Philadelphia Eagles matchup this week against the Raiders. Jaelan Phillips especially. He has fit right back into Vic Fangio's defense. Since week 10, he hasn't been really known for a high volume tackler, but he's getting tackles. So what's nice about Phillips is he's providing a pretty nice floor. He's not dependent on, getting a sack if he has to get a sack or a sack and a fumble, or he has to have these big plays to pay off. Week 12, he didn't have a tackle, but basically in 4 out of his 5 games with Philly, he has 4+ tackles. But most importantly, he has 27 pressures since joining Philly. He only has 1 game of fewer than 4 pressures with the Philadelphia Eagles. He's got 4 quarterback hits, and he is just generating consistent pressure. Now, he only does have 1 sack since joining Philly, so I know we want the sacks. But I think he does get home this week against the Raiders. Really bad offensive line, probably a top 3 worst. You're putting them up against probably Tennessee is probably one of the worst offensive lines. Should match up on he typically lines up on the left side, so he'll get matched up on DJ Glaze in this matchup. Since week 10, Glaze is allowing a 13.2% pressure rate, which for an individual offensive lineman is not great. Average pressure rate allowed for an offensive lineman is between 5 and 6. Anything really higher than 6 or 7% is they're pretty much a turnstile. Over the last 5 weeks, Phillips has a 25% win rate, 17.3% pressure rate. So he has those really good, consistent, sticky, elite pressure metrics that just say, a big week is upcoming. I'm not going to say he's going to get 3 or 4 sacks. He's not going to, anything like that. But a nice streak, hopefully, of sack conversions are coming. So again, I like Phillips's matchup with the Raiders this week.
Yeah, and I think you nailed it too at that regression. Like the sacks are coming. He's got all those sticky stats, all those metrics that will turn into sacks. He hasn't hit them yet, but there's that regression, regression to the median for a reason. And those days are coming, and we're running out of weeks, so he's got to get him here soon. So,
yep.
I'm going to stick in the NFC East for my call out here, and I'm going to go with Brian Burns. Brian Burns is really having an MVP. Brian Burns is really having an MVP type season this year. He's just being overshadowed by Myles Garrett, who's going to have a season for the records. Burns has 56 tackles on the season. That's only 14 off his career high with 4 games left to go. And at his current pace, he should easily hit those numbers. He has 13 sacks, which is already a career high. He's got 2 forced fumbles on the season. That's good for 215 points in Big 3 scoring. He is just behind Max Crosby and Myles Garrett there, so that's a great return. Washington gave up 3 sacks last week. Brian Burns lines up mostly on that left defensive end side, so he's probably going to be going up against the rookie Josh Connerly, who's got a 58.4 PFF grade on the season, which isn't terrible, but it's also not great. He's ranked 60th out of 82 at the offensive tackle position, and so he did allow a couple QB pressures last week, and like we said before, like eventually those pressures turn into sacks, and obviously somebody like Burns has the metrics to get that done. He's coming off a bye. He's healthy. Over at Fantasy Pros, he's kind of ranked really low right now as a defensive lineman. I think it's probably an oversight coming off the bye, but he's rested and healthy. He's got a great supporting cast with probably Thibodeau coming back this week. He was close to coming back last week. Dexter Lawrence is there, eating up double and triple teams in the middle. And then when Abdul Carter's not watching porn in film room, he's going to be doing pretty well there too. I think the game script is a big thing here. Washington made the Minnesota Vikings look like the 2024 Vikings last week. They might be throwing a lot. They don't really have a lot in the run game. And the Giants have been very sneakily having a good offense here. They put up some points with Jackson Dart there. So I think these are all great reasons for Brian Burns to not only be a DL1 this week, but probably closer to a top 6 option this week.
Yeah, and I think he's going to avoid Laramie Tunsil, which is also a pretty big deal because I think Tunsil might be the 3rd ranked tackle according to PFF. So if he's able to avoid Laramie Tunsil, that'll be very beneficial.
Yeah. And they do a lot of rotation there. And I think if they do get Thibodeau back, that can only help Burns, drawing more attention. They do that NASCAR package where they get all of them on the field. They got Carter standing up as that linebacker look. So that just looks, that's what they were hoping to have all season long. So.
Nope, I like it. Yeah, no, and then hopefully those rankings get updated because I think I got Burns as my DL2 in my projections, like the second projected. So there's definitely some updates that need to be made because there's no way someone with 13 sacks should be ranked 47th.
Yeah, we got to get that hit that refresh button. So
yeah.
All right, so Mike, a thing or two about linebackers. Apparently you put out a Green Dot article on Mondays. You do some projections during the week. So we're all curious, who's that linebacker you're loving this week?
Really like Cashman from Minnesota. And I got to be careful not to say Brian Cashman, who's the New York Yankee general manager. But no, I really like Blake Cashman. And if it weren't for injury, I know our own Josh Raymer had him as a sneaky dark horse candidate for LB1 overall. And I think if he doesn't get injured, he's definitely in that conversation. Cashman has just he's been solid all season. Like I said, if he doesn't get injured, who knows where he's at, but since his full-time return, he has an 18.6% tackle rate, which is an elite rate. That is an elite rate. He has 10 plus tackles in 6 of 7 games. And when in the game that he did not hit double-digit tackles, he had 9 tackles. Most important which is really impressive for a linebacker that gets the volume that he does and the tackle volume that he has, he only has a 5.9% missed tackle rate. So he's not missing tackles. He's not leaving fantasy points on the field. Really like the matchup against Dallas. They're a zone heavy defense, which is really good for linebacker tackles. Last week, 4 of Jack Campbell's tackles came in coverage and zone coverage. And then the week before in week 13, 6 of Nick Bolton's tackles came from coverage in zone. So, it's a tackle friendly scheme. And Dallas has allowed an off-ball linebacker to go for 9 plus tackles in 3 straight games. They're allowing nearly 16 tackles a game to opposing linebackers. And Cashman is just one of those downhill runners, just gets to the ball, climbs, scrapes, really good range, and just has a nose for the football.
Sounds like a good IDP bets there for anything under 9 for tackles for Cashman this week. Then we'll have to let our good friend Johnny the Greek know. You mentioned the tackle rate at 18.6, and you said that's pretty high, pretty elite.
Yeah.
What's like a good number that you're liking as a tackle rate from a linebacker?
Guys like Fasade Oluokun, Roquan Smith, Zaire Franklin, those guys are typically around 14 or 15%.
Okay,
and
so getting like almost 5% more is out of control. Then, yeah.
Yeah. And for Cashman playing 100% of the snaps, because sometimes you'll see, we always made fun of Alex Singleton when he'd have a 21% tackle rate with a 75, with not having 100% of the snaps is insane. But when you have a guy like with Cashman, he's playing 100% of the snaps, getting a full complement, and for him to be recording that is an elite number. But yeah, typically 14 to 15% are your LB1s. Those guys that you have ranked pretty high.
Sweet. I know that we're talking about a linebacker here from Cleveland, but not Carson Schwessinger. Mike, you've been on.
There's other linebackers in Cleveland?
There are other linebackers.
I did not even.
I know. There aren't any cards left on YouTube, or not on YouTube, on eBay. I went to go try to find some, and they're all gone. So some M. Woellert guy is buying them all up. So I'm going to talk about the other linebacker that I can't afford to buy cards of, and that's Devin Bush. And the reason I like Devin Bush this week is he's going up against the Bears, and the Bears are a very plus matchup for opposing linebackers this season. They lead the league right now in rushing attempts with 406. That's the most in the NFL. Right now, Devin Bush is kind of sitting around that linebacker 3 territory, and it seems a little bit low at the moment, given he's had several really solid games going into this really great matchup. And that offense in Cleveland is really starting to click, and I think that only helps the defense, put more plays, and so teams aren't like running out the clock at the end of the game and things like that, where kind of that game script narrative kind of is going in the favor of, hey, this defense, they're playing a little quicker, they're putting more plays, they get more tackle opportunities. So, Mike, you're a Cleveland guy. What's that offense you thinking is going to continue to ascend here, looking like a real NFL offense?
I hope so, because it's been better to watch over the last couple of weeks. It's nice to have a quarterback that actually gets the ball down the field instead of throwing the ball 4 or 5 yards down and just like death by 1,000 paper. It's like death by 1,000 paper cuts with Dylan Gabriel. It's like, let's just throw the ball 4 yards down the field. It's like, all right, just kill me now. Just let's get the ball down the field. Can we get the ball down more than 5 yards at a clip, please?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely nice to have somebody being able to get the ball, 10 yards down. So, but yeah, never my wildest dreams would I've thought our defense would have let us down last week. But no, I still think it's a borderline elite unit. And, if the offense gets off the field quicker, less drives, that gets, it gets the defense back on the field. So, hopefully more snaps for the defense.
Mike, is the 2026 Cleveland Browns quarterback on the roster right now?
Honestly, I hope so. I'm willing. I've seen enough out of Sanders now to like, all right, let's roll with him next year. Let's take the draft picks. Let's build around him. Let's get maybe a good tackle during free agency. Let's use our pick for a wide receiver and maybe another tackle. And let's just build around him, because I mean, it's so funny. I mean, this draft was supposed to be, oh yeah, this is the draft for quarterbacks. There was like 6 or 7 guys, and it's basically now how it is. It seems like every year now it's down to two guys again. So now it's always like, oh, next year. Yeah, we kick the can down the road every year. It's always next year for the quarterback. So I've seen enough out of Sanders where I'm like, all right, I want to see more out of him for the rest of this year, and I want a full year in whatever offensive system. I mean, that throw that he made to Harold Fannin in the back zone, I mean, that was like, all right, that's an NFL throw. I'm good seeing him for the rest of the season, and I'm good building around him. So let's do that. Like if they're fifth, if they end up with the 5th pick, and if they took Carnell Tate with that pick, with pick 5, I'm good with that. So, and then get a good offensive line and just build around them. I'm good with that.
You actually answered 2 questions in one, because I asked if your quarterback was on the roster, and then my follow-up was going to be, is your quarterback on the field currently? So you already took the Deshaun Watson equation out of it. So,
well, and he's always going to be the wild card. So I'm hoping it's Sanders, but unfortunately, Watson is still hanging around. So
they invested just a little bit in that guy, so they got
and I think even still, I don't even know. I mean, I think his cap hit isn't as awful next year, but I don't think they're gonna. I don't think they're still gonna move off of him. So I've seen enough out of Watson. I don't see anymore.
And the one thing too with that is Sanders is doing this without any real training camp run. He never got a lot of look with the ones. He even through the practices and stuff like that. Like his first game exposure was like, that was his first reps he was getting. So, this second, third week, now this is like the 3rd, 4th week of training camp. So now he's really starting to hit his stride. So,
and he's doing
anyway,
it
this
behind,
is the defensive. Let's get back to
Devin Bush. And then I was going to say he's doing it, but with 2 really bad tackles. So it's not a really good offensive line. But yeah, we digress.
I do a lot of things with 2 bad ankles, so I can't complain. But defensively, Devin Bush, I think he's a great start this week. I think Chicago is going to continue to run the ball a lot. We saw last week what happens when they tried to put the ball in Caleb Williams' hand to win the game. Go Pack, go. Devin Bush is having a really great season. Statistically, he's got 86 tackles, 2 sacks, and 2 interceptions. So he's kind of getting it done at all 4 phases of the game there. He's got an 88.8 PFF grade, which leads all Cleveland linebackers, including Mr. Carson Schlesinger. He's got a really high tackle floor. He's only got his lowest game is 4 combined tackles is his lowest this season. So that really offers some really nice roster construction going into the first week of the playoffs for you. If you know you're going to be getting that with Bush, that kind of helps with some other areas. He's a great LB3 this week. He's probably going to finish probably as like a high LB2 by the end of the week in most league scoring. So
yeah, he's getting he's mostly the nickel, he's getting all the nickel snaps and that two linebacker defense. And he's really improved in his coverage. So I think that's also keeping him on the field a little bit more. His coverage has definitely improved. He's got a couple of interceptions this year. He had a really nice interception against Tennessee, kind of disguising what he was doing, dropped back, followed his eyes, and just made a really nice play on the ball. So I think that is definitely, that's definitely helped, helped him stay on the field.
It was crazy that kind of like he's been in the league already for 6 years. That's like what happened. So
started with the Steelers. I mean, he started off pretty well with the Steelers and then just kind of toiled around.
All the linebackers start out really good with the Steelers and then they kind of go to the wayside. So we'll kind of see what happens. So, all right, let's move to the secondary here, Mike. Who's a safety that you are fired up about in week 15?
I like Kamren Curl's matchup, and when I look at it, it's almost like, no duh. I look at him. I think in most tackle heavy formats, he's the DB2, and I'm like, oh my god, I didn't even realize he was already that, he was that high. He's just having a really good season, and just producing. I mean, he's blitzing a little bit more. He doesn't necessarily have a high box rate, but most of his tackles are coming deep, but he's playing, because he's playing more deep, but he's productive pre-snap, post-snap. He's just making plays on the ball. He's just been really good again in the defense. He's comfortable with it. He's getting plays in the backfield, cleaning things up. And as far as his fantasy production, I think he only has maybe 3 games under double-digit fantasy points since the bye week. He's got, since the bye week, he has 4 double-digit fantasy points in tackle-friendly, 10, 20, 14, 16. So really consistent producer all season. And again, I like his matchup this week. Like I said, 6+ tackles in 4 of his last 5, 10.6 tackle rate. So for a defensive back, that's actually a pretty solid number for someone of his ilk that, doesn't necessarily play close, but is a good producer. So 10.6, that's actually a pretty good rate for defensive back. Rams allowing almost 16 tackles per game to the safety position. And over the last 5 weeks, the Rams offense is allowing the 7th most points to the safety position. So really good spot for Kamren Curl to continue to produce this week.
And this should be a pretty explosive offensive game with Detroit too. Like there should be a lot of points scored, a lot of volume for plays. I think that's what kind of helped Curl along this season too, is they've been winning on the offensive side of the ball. So teams have had to really catch up. So he's getting a lot of those tackles late, playing in that Rams system where they only play traditionally one linebacker. So he's, getting that in the space, he's getting that opportunity there. And I also think, the loss of Quentin Lake too, he's been able to eat some of there too. So yeah, I really like Curl heading into this week too. So good call. My defensive back is going to be Tre'Von Moehrig. And, he's had 2 weeks off, one because of a suspension and then one because of the bye. So he's coming back and I think he's got something to prove. Whenever I think of like why he got suspended, I always think of Eric Cartman in the Rochambeau episode when he was punching people in the nuts. So punch you in the nuts. So Carolina's kind of in the control of their own playoffs right now. They're ahead of the division right now. So, everything's in front of them. They got a very motivated team. Kaden Elliss has that team believing that they are going to do well. He's playing really well this season. He has 81 tackles, a sack, and an INT. He's had 4 straight games of double-digit production prior to his little hiatus. He's got a decent matchup, honestly, with the Saints this week. They're offering 14.5 tackle opportunities to safety over the last 3 weeks. And I think if you think about like season long versus the last 3 weeks, we kind of have to focus on those last 3 weeks because that's kind of really what's happening. Tyler Shuck has kind of come into this offense. He's sustaining drives. He's pushing the ball downfield. He's running the ball himself. and kind of right in that IDP sweet spot that we love to see too. Moehrig has 723 snaps on the season, and 606 of them have come in that box IDP sweet spot that we love. That's 84% of his snaps. So he's almost that linebacker play there at the safety position. And just like Kamren Curl, if you can get consistency at a very inconsistent position, they're hard to find. So give me some fire up Moehrig this week. All right. So just to kind of recap here, Mike, some players that were a little higher on this week than consensus. We got at the defensive line, we got Jaelan Phillips and Brian Burns. Linebackers, Blake Cashman and Devin Bush. At the safety position, we got Kamren Curl and, of course, Tre'Von Moehrig. So we're going to go to the fades. And this necessarily doesn't mean that they're players that we're not starting, but we're just kind of tempering expectations on, like if they had like 3 weeks coming into this week and they've scored 12, 13, 14 points every week, maybe we're not expecting 12 or 13 points from them this week. And so maybe that's kind of thinking like, how am I going to make up the loss of those 6 or 7 points somewhere else in my lineup? So just because they're in this section of the video does not mean that they're like, we're not starting them, but just kind of maybe be careful. So got a hot one here, Mike. You're gonna make a lot of fans a little upset. Kyle B, be careful out there. Who's that defensive lineman that you're tempering?
So this matchup is basically the irresistible, in the words of Gorilla Monsoon, the irresistible force meeting the immovable object. So we've got Micah Parsons as kind of a fade. So it comes in where I mentioned earlier where you're looking at matchups. So say you have built up a defensive line group of, say you were lucky enough and you were able to get Myles Garrett, you were able to get Micah Parsons, and you were able to get someone like Brian Burns or a Josh Allen. So this is where you're probably going to want to play a matchup, kind of look at the matchup. And out of some of these guys, Micah Parsons has probably one of the toughest offensive line matchups of the week against Denver. Micah Parsons will probably line up over Grant Bowles most of the game. This isn't to say that they're not that Halfin isn't going to move him around, isn't going to put him inside, isn't going to put him on the other side over McGlinchey, but McGlinchey is pretty good. He's only allowed 1 sack all year too. So this is a really good offensive line. So, Micah Parsons, 17.9% pressure rate, 30% win rate. We know his stats, 11 quarterback hits, sacks in, I think, 3 or 4 games. I mean, he's just going off. Grant Bowles is allowing a 2.7% pressure rate, individual pressure rate, and has yet to allow a sack this season. So he is keeping Bo Nix clean. So it's just one of those matchups. So I would not be surprised maybe to see Micah Parsons leaving with maybe a 3-tackle, 4-tackle game, maybe a tackle for loss, maybe a couple of hurries, obviously that, but the only really thing that Parsons has going for him in this matchup, one, he has a relentless motor. So, I mean, he's always going to keep going. Bo Nix has been responsible for 21% of his total pressures and 8 sacks. So he is a little bit susceptible to kind of creating his own pressure, scrambling into pressure, creating his own pressure and sacks. But if I'm just looking at it from a strictly offensive line, defensive line matchup, this might be one that I fade because, like I said, Grant Bowles has been phenomenal all season. And I think he might even be below. I don't even think he's maybe allowed barely double-digit total pressures. And we're talking almost, I think, 450 to 500 pass block snaps. So this isn't a small sample size. This is all season that he's been doing this, and he's just been he is an elite left tackle.
And he plays in a Division II with some elite edge rushers, so it's not like he's got a cupcake schedule. Like, he's playing against the Raiders, he's playing against the Chiefs. There are some some tough opponents on those teams. So yeah, I'm with you here. This is a tough one, especially with Parsons. I think he was the first player in the NFL to have 12.5 sacks his first 5 seasons. So like, obviously he's got it, but watching him week in and week out, being a Packer fan, you know, he's really double and triple team, like relentlessly. Like he's generating more for the people around him than he is maybe for himself. But you know, it's always sweet when number one gets a sack. So
it will be interesting. It'll be an interesting chess match to see if they do move him around to try to keep him off of Bolus and kind of see what happens. But if they keep him on one side, I think it's going to be a rough go. But Parsons is just really good. He's just a relentless rusher. So I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if he got a sack. But like I said, I'm tempering expectations with him on this week.
And how tough is it that a defensive lineman has the number 1 jersey? Like, I know you made a comment that BYU should probably lose the game just because their quarterback wears.
You shouldn't even be considered to the playoffs. Your quarterback wears number 47. I mean, it's a ridiculous number for a quarterback.
It's like when you're a sophomore and you make varsity and the only jersey that's left over is like number 39 and 47. You're like, oh, I guess this is where I am. So, but so, all right. My defensive lineman to fade this week, and again, it's probably more opportunity than it is anything else, but it's going to be Alex Highsmith. I think he's got a really tough matchup versus Miami. Tua is holding the ball for an average of just 2.4 seconds on his 458 dropbacks. That's quicker than a lot of teams in the league. The average right now is 2.6 to 2.8 seconds. And I think this is by design under Mike McDaniel's offense there, just to try to keep Tua upright and take him from avoiding sacks and to take him from becoming another meme. Last week, the Jets were only able to generate 1 sack. And I know that the Steelers' defensive line is immensely better than the Jets, but the Dolphins are the second stingiest to opposing defensive linemen for tackles. So I think for Highsmith this week, it's either a sack or bust for him. And so I'm not sure that I'm willing to risk that in the playoffs with my playoff chances right now. Highsmith is really highly ranked right now, and I don't think that he's going to kind of meet expectations there. This is just me, but playing on Monday nights or those primetime matchups seem to always kind of have some duds too. And I know Thursday night games seem to be more duddish than Monday nights, but you know, that's just something to kind of consider there too. I saw him get a little hobble during last week's game, nothing too serious, but you know, those kind of things can kind of linger and maybe kind of flare up again. I mentioned that he was pretty highly ranked. Fantasy Pros has him as the DL7 right now. And with buys already past us and everyone available, I kind of see him. I kind of have like maybe 24 better options than him this week. I see him as a defensive lineman 3, maybe not a DL1 this week. That kind of steam that he's ranked at right now.
Yeah, and then when you mention offensive line, he's going to he lines up on Patrick Paul's side, and actually, Paul has been very improved in his play, his pass blocking. Last 3 weeks, 80+ grade pass blocks. And he has 5 games of 0 pressures allowed, including 2 of the last 3. So he's playing. So he's kind of in his zone. He's playing some really good football, and his techniques have definitely improved. And Highsmith and Herbig both line up, I believe, on Patrick Paul's side. So again, like you said, I mean, these guys are good rushers. They have techniques. They study also. So it won't surprise me, you know, if they do, but yeah, I'm tempering my expectations. Patrick Paul's been a pretty good left tackle, and it's only his 2nd year. So, I mean, that's definitely good to see him develop, because I don't think he was very good last year.
No, often those offensive tackles that are thrown to the fire, you know, they get trial by fire. You know, we saw it with Connerly too at the Reds or the Commanders. There's no Redskins anymore. So,
yep.
All right. Let's move to linebackers, and this one kind of hurts me, Mike. This is kind of one of my favorite linebackers. Definitely in D up. I'm way too overexposed to this guy in D up right now. But who's that linebacker you're kind of tempering expectations on?
Kaden Elliss. He's just kind of been meh. I mean, he's been okay. You know, he doesn't have some of those big plays, those splash plays that we liked from him last year. Just 1 interception, handful of sacks, handful of quarterback hits, 88 tackles. So, you know, you were kind of hoping for a little bit more out of him this year. Only 1 game of double-digit tackles since week 8, where he exploded for 12. He's gone 6, 6, 5, 9, 8, 6. A little bit too inconsistent for me, just especially for someone of his volume. Obviously with the green dot, he's 100% snaps. Divine Diablo's been pretty good. He's been a 3-down guy alongside him, but just not getting all that, just not getting that tackle share that you want to see out of your LB1. And with the, it's a decent matchup. It's not a great matchup against Tampa. Tampa's allowing around 15 tackles, but if you look at it, you say 15 tackles, maybe Ellis gets maybe 7, Diablo gets maybe the other 7. So it's just not one of those matchups where, like, if I had Quay Walker, and if I had, if I had Jack Campbell, Quay Walker, Kaden Elliss, Terrell Dodson as my LBs, I'm probably going to sit Ellis out of those guys. So that's just, he's been a little bit too inconsistent and just hasn't had those spike weeks that we've seen out of him in the past.
So you're kind of safe with Ellis as like an LB4 range in leagues that
about a 3, 4. Yeah. That's if I've got 5, if you're starting 3 or 4, you're probably starting him. But like if you're in like a 2 or a 3 linebacker league, I'm probably starting some other guys, over Ellis.
Yep. And I think that brings up a great point too, Mike, because a lot of times we look at these players, like Ellis is probably a player that you drafted early in the linebacker position to be your LB2, LB1 for the season. And it hurts to put them on the bench because you invested, into it. And I think the most successful fantasy managers are those that are able to like ignore the name and just kind of put in the production piece from week to week. So
yeah, like I'm starting Cedric Gray over Kaden Ellis. Like those, like that guy. Yeah, I mean that things like that. I mean, there's like if I said, if I had Cedric Gray, Jamie Sherwood, Kaden Ellis, I'm starting those guys over Kaden Ellis.
Yeah. We had a really good discussion last week too. Like Derwin James was a player too. Like if it wasn't Derwin James's name, the production and the stats, he would be almost waiver wire kind of candidate right now. But because he has Derwin James on the back of his jersey, he's a topic of conversation.
Yep.
Well, I cheated. I got a duo here to avoid this week, and I'm going to go with the linebackers in San Francisco, D. Winters and Curtis Robinson. They get the Tennessee Titans this week. So week 12, great matchup versus Carolina. They had a combined 4 tackle game between them. 4 tackles combined between the two of them. Week 13, a dream matchup versus Cleveland. Cleveland was just oozing points to opposing teams at the linebacker position. They came away with 6 combined tackles apiece, 7 points each in Big 3 scoring. So 2 great matchups and 2 really big duds by, a position that has been like IDP gold like for years, the San Francisco linebacker positions. This week, Tatum Bethune might be coming back, and that could kind of lead to like this ugly rotation of not knowing who. Curtis Robinson's probably going to be the odd man out, but we're not quite sure how that looks. We can sit here on, a Wednesday night and kind of predict what's going to happen, but, we've been wrong in the past. All 3 of these guys are probably more LB4 or later territory for me this week until we get some clarity there. The matchup versus the Titans is really kind of tricky because it's better for a team to get sacks on, but they're only giving up like 13.4 points to oppose or tackle opportunities to opposing teams right now. And that probably got a huge bump because of the ghost of Tony Pollard reemerged last week, and they just kind of came out of nowhere. Game script for me in this one is definitely going to lean towards San Francisco running the ball a lot. So I'll be playing the other linebackers in this game. Probably Barton and Gray are going to be the linebackers to play. And that keeps your players on the sideline. So too many question marks for me going into this one that I want any part of my first round fantasy football matchup to be decided on between these 2 guys.
Yeah. And last week, the Titans basically made it their mission not to let Myles Garrett break the record. So there were more run opportunities. And basically Cam Ward dropped back, ball was out. So they had a really good game plan, and you got to give it to them. They made it their mission to just not let Garrett break the record on him. And what's funny is I think he had 3 tackles, 4 tackles. He had 3 tackles for a loss and a sack, and that's a horrible game for Myles Garrett.
Yeah.
Any other edge rusher, defensive lineman would have loved to have had a stat line like that, but that was a bad game for Garrett last week.
Well, especially when you go like to underdog and you see that the line is starting at 1.5 sacks a game, not like 1.5 tackles,
no.
1.5 sacks. Yeah. So that's
that was my projection for him. I mean, that was the first time I think in my this year projections, projecting someone for that. I mean, like that's his floor right now, 1.5, and against this against that offensive line.
Yes.
I mean, why can't he break the record? So yeah, that was my first time. I mean, I told Josh, I'm like, Josh, look at my Myles predictions. Like, well, it's deserved. I mean,
right.
So, but no, they made it their mission to just they weren't going to let Garrett destroy him.
Yeah. Do you think that's a recipe to attack this Browns defense? Do you think maybe they got exposed a little bit with Tennessee?
It's a copycat league. The NFL is a copycat league. If they watch the film, they're like, all right, well, this is what we're going to do. I mean, if I was an offensive coordinator, I'm like, all right, this is what we're going to do. We're going to run away from them, or maybe run at them. We're going to do these short, quick passes. We're not going to let our quarterback drop back and let them pin their ears back. It's going to be short, quick passes. So, that's what I would do. It's a copycat league. They got a blueprint.
And through 13 weeks of the NFL season, the Tennessee Titans were allowing Cam Ward to just take a beating. Like he was like record-setting pace. Yeah. It was tough.
I mean, he was on pace to. I mean, he might still be on pace, but I think he was on pace to get sacked 70, 75 times.
Yeah, that poor guy. He's best friends with like a training room. So
yep.
So. All right, we're going to switch to the secondary here, Mike, with our defensive backs. And who's a defensive back or defensive backs that you're kind of fading this week?
I think I'm just going to fade the Giant safeties this week. I mean, we've got. I don't know if Tyler Nubin's going to be back. It's a whole group that just has been kind of a disappointment for me. I thought Nubin was going to have a better season, but Dane Belton, I know he's strung together a pretty solid. He's strung together a pretty solid stretch of games, 3 straight of 7+ tackles, 2 tackles for loss, 2 defended passes. But I don't like the matchup with the Commanders. Not really allowing too many tackles to the safety position, not many points to the safety position. So for this week, it's just kind of going to be simple. I think I'm just going to fade the Giant safeties, no matter who no matter who they are this week. So pretty simple for me. That's kind of where I'm leaning and I'm fading.
Yeah, and I think sometimes we get into like if you have 3 of them, you have none. Like we want the for sure one guy there. And like you mentioned, Nubin was supposed to be the guy at the start of the season. Belton's come in, and he's been a great waiver wire pickup. Kind of playing for Holland for a little few weeks, playing for Nubin a couple weeks. So part of the Iowa Hawkeyes. So somewhere Eric Harms is smiling right now. So. All right, my defensive back to fade. This is a really tough one because I really like his game, but Nick Emmanwori, and he's had a huge game last week. 6 tackles, a sack, a pick, 31.25 points in Big 3 scoring. Indy is a top 5 option for opposing safeties this season. So you're probably like, whoa, he's coming in the game really hot. He's got a great matchup. Why the hesitation? This is not the same Indianapolis Colts team that we saw a couple weeks ago, even last week. They're probably going to be without Indiana Jones. Anthony Richardson is already on IR when he hurt his eye with a stretchy band incident before a game. Possibly Riley Leonard is going to be the quarterback this week. I know that they signed Phillip Rivers this week from the retirement home. The dude's 44. I don't know how he looked today in camp or in practice, but I can just see there being a lot of 3-and-outs this week. And when you have a lot of 3-and-outs, that's not a lot of opportunities for your opposing defense to score points. I can see Seattle just running and throttling the Colts this week with a lot of points, running the clock, things like that. So his scoring has been propped a lot by big splash plays. And we know that we can't sustain those on a weekly basis. Those aren't those sticky stats like you referred to. The 3 games prior to his big Week 14 outburst, he had 3 tackles, 8 tackles, and 4 tackles, all sub 10-point performances. Julian Love is getting back into the mix. So there's going to be some, like, not so much snaps taken away, but just a few tackle opportunities taken away, maybe playing a little high safety, a little low safety. So, this Legion of Boom is definitely back, but I think this might be a kind of a fade week for Emmanwori.
Yeah, I think with Emmanwori, he's interesting. I kind of like, I guess, devil's advocate. I think Julian Love might have more of an impact on Okada, because I think Okada's been the guy that's kind of filled in that Julian Love role. And Emmanwori has also played some more slot than box, but he does play that second or third off ball linebacker. So Emmanwori is starting to make some plays that he made in college that are really starting to stand out. So I don't know. Maybe it's one of those things. Maybe they don't keep him off the field, but it is the offense. So I'm probably going to play devil's advocate on that one, but I can see where you're coming from. It'll be interesting to see how the Colts offense now operates, whether it's Rippon, who it might be Brett Rippon, I don't know, but Rivers, I mean, how bad is the state of the quarterback position that the Colts needed to that he needed to get Phillip Rivers out of retirement?
He just ruined his Hall of Fame ballot. Like, now he's got to wait.
Yeah, you got to wait another 5 years.
Yeah. I did see that Riley Leonard did have a full practice today, so there is a chance that he's probably going to be under center. And he didn't look too terrible, but like you said, like the state of the quarterback position right now, this is where we are. We've got a 44-year-old Phillip Rivers coming out of retirement. Yeah. Well, he's got like 98 kids. He's probably got to come back to get a paycheck. So
college ain't cheap.
I got 2 and I'm worried about it. So the reason I did have Emmanwori on this list is I had seen him as a D-back 7 this week.
Yep.
And that was just a little lofty for me, especially with, no teams on a bye. I think that the matchups are the offense for Indy has me a little hesitant about going into this game. So, all right. So players were fading this week. Go ahead, Mike.
Yep. No, I was just going to say, I think there are a few guys that, well, now that, I mean, with Tyke Smith out, that kind of doubtful, that kind of, kind of puts a kibosh on some things. But no, I'm probably starting guys like maybe Antoine Winfield, maybe Kevin Byard, maybe Curl, Chin. Those are probably some guys you probably have above, but it'll be, but like you said, it'll be interesting to see how the offense kind of shakes out.
Yeah. I just felt that 7 was a little lofty. I love the player. Like,
I do too.
Yeah. So, players were fading this week. Micah Parsons, Alex Highsmith, Kaden Elliss, the linebackers from San Francisco, the safeties in New York for the Giants, and then Nick Emmanwori this week. So, Mike, we're going to end the show here like we always do with a player that we just have this scratching our heads. We can't figure out why the lack of production's not there, what's going on. This is a player that we were pretty high on coming into the season, but just hasn't lived up to expectations. And you kind of teased it out a little earlier, but who's that player that you're just like, what is going on?
Daiyan Henley. I got nothing. And sometimes it's like when you're ready to write him off, it's like, but he's got a good matchup. It's like, God damn it, is he gonna like finally break out? And it's like, no, he's not. Like, again this week, when you look at his last 6 weeks, beginning from week 8, 4 tackles, 7 tackles, 6 tackles, 5 tackles, 3 tackles, 7 tackles. And it's like, these are, he's had some pretty good matchups. And it's like, all right, I'm finally going to bench him. And then you look, well, he had 8 tackles and a sack against Kansas City in week 1. I'm like, but I think it's time to sit him. I think you just, and you know what, if he goes off, and it's just, it is what it is, but it's like, and I think he's playing in the same scheme. I think it's the same defensive coordinator as last year. I think it's Minter and Harbaugh again from last year into this year. So I got nothing really. I mean, it might just be one of those things where I just at the end of the season look at, like I did with his game, with his week 17 game, where he put up a goose egg in the championship game. He had 156 tackles last year. and his production is is basically down 30 to 40% from last year. So I got nothing on Henley. I don't know. I got nothing.
And it was the same conversation we had last week because I had Derwin James in the same spot last week. But who's making the tackles for the Chargers this year? If Henley's not making them, Derwin James is definitely not making them because his stat line looks about, right there with Henley's, and it's just like, where are these tackles going for the Chargers this year? Yeah, it's tough. It's ugly.
The Chargers as a whole have made 677 total tackles, which is low to me. Henley has 80, James has 70,
weeks,
and Elijah Molden then is third on the team with 46.
Just like we predicted.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I got another linebacker for you, and I'm hoping you can kind of make me feel a little hopium. He's another guy that had a lot in the D up, so I need some more love here. Robert Spillane, New England linebacker, going up against Buffalo. Highly drafted this season, highly drafted linebacker as when he signed from the Raiders here. He had a great couple weeks, and then he totally disappears, and then he kind of rebounds again. It's kind of been his MO this season. He's really been the model of consistency lately. He had 5 tackles in 5 straight games. He had a really great matchup against the Giants last week, and he only had 2 tackles. Mm-hmm. I think the bye week came at a great time for him and this team. Having a week 14 bye is a long stretch of football. New England was playing exceptionally well. I think the bye week was needed. I think some of these players were getting a little bumped and bruised and needed some recovery time. He gets Buffalo this week. Surprisingly, they're playing in a very meaningful game at this stage of the season. That's something that has not happened between Buffalo and New England for quite some time. Is Spillane someone who's kind of getting back into that circle of trust, or is he someone that's kind of like he's going to kind of ebb and flow here on out?
Yeah, I mentioned in my write-up, heading into the bye, 7 tackles over 2 games, so heading a little bit cold. But again, when you look at that first meeting against Buffalo, he had 9 tackles and a forced fumble. So you look at that first game as like, okay, there's something, like the Poison song, give me something to believe in. So hopefully there, you're gonna, hopefully you can kind of get off the schneid and have one of those games. I think he's on pace for about 126 tackles, which is, it's not what he was getting in the Raiders, but I think that move maybe to more of a man heavy scheme probably maybe had a little bit something to do with it, but I still think he's been productive enough, and I think I'm more confident in, and this might be a no-brainer, or it might be a no duh. I'm more confident in Spillane than I am in Henley.
I hope so, because I need a little hopium. I need in the D-ups, you can't really do anything about it. You can't. You're just good and go. Let's go. Let's ride Spillane. But in your season long leagues, you're looking at Spillane like, oh, he's got a couple clunkers. Like, is he a safe LB2, LB3 range?
I'll say this: if you've got a linebacker group of Kaden Elliss, Robert Spillane, Daiyan Henley, good luck this week. Good luck. Good luck.
You probably aren't playing in a meaningful football game this week if you had that linebacker core.
And you know what? That is a potential linebacker core too. That somebody could have those 3 easily.
Yeah, Spillane, like last year, he had that very funnel heavy, tackle heavy funnel to him, soaked up tackles. Ellis had a lot of sacks last year, so he was really high. So that you said, that could be a real thing. So So. All right, that's some good stuff there, Mike. Hey, before we head out here, Mike, I want to ask you if you have any sage words of wisdom, that's kind of helped you be successful as a fantasy football manager, whether it's this time of the year heading into the playoffs, just what kind of helped make you successful in the leagues.
Just don't overthink it. And if you got into the playoffs at this point, that's an accomplishment in and of itself if you're in the playoffs. So, that's all you can hope for is get in, and then anything can happen. I know with some of my teams, I'm kind of, some of them are hitting a slog where I'm like, okay, then getting some injuries. So just dance with the guys that brought you there, and just, hey, like I said, pat yourself on the back. You got to the playoffs. You weathered the storm, because the injuries seem to be a little bit more, there seem to be some pretty high profile injuries this year. I mean, Fred, we haven't had Fred Warner, Nick Bosa for almost half. We've lost them for half the season. We've been weathering some production. So just know it. If you made it, enjoy. Hopefully you can play some spoiler, and hopefully, we just, like I said, dance with the guys that brought you. Don't overthink it. And, just good luck. Hopefully, Jeff, everybody at the IDP show have helped you. Whether if you made the playoffs or not, hopefully we've imparted some wisdom, helped you learn, helped you, grow your IDP knowledge. And, hopefully we've helped along the way this season.
Yeah, for sure. With that said, Mike, obviously you're, it seems like every day you're pumping out some content somewhere for, whether it's projections or green dot or things like that. What do you got? What are you working on right now? And kind of what can we expect in the off season from you?
So, yeah, I mean, this week Green Dot's out, projections are out. I'm working on my weekly Substack article that should be out tomorrow morning, like it typically is. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much the rest of the season. Off season, it's about that time to start looking at the rookies. There've been a few that have already stood out to me. So, off season, hopefully, we'll stay tuned for that. But I'd probably not going much of anywhere. I told Josh he's stuck with me until you shut the door on me and kick me out. So, he's stuck with me. So, to be determined, but yeah, no, I'm at this point with the IDP show, I'm not going anywhere.
Awesome. Not a bad thing to hear at all, Mike. We appreciate all that you do for the show and also for all of us fans of the game. So looking forward to another great season with you. That's going to do it for this episode of the IDP After Show. I want to thank Mike again for coming on to the show and sharing some fantastic knowledge about the game that we all love. And again, I want to thank him for all that he does on a weekly basis. We just talked about the hours and stuff that he puts into the projections and everything like that. So hopefully, Mike, that we all appreciate it. Yep. If you haven't done so already, please make sure you hit that like and notification button. But more importantly, if you haven't done so already, hit that subscription button so that you're alerted to all the great content all week long that the IDP show puts out. Join me next week as we look to propel ourselves even further into the fantasy football playoffs as Shane Hallman joins me and we break down an all-important Week 16. Until then, from Mike and myself, we say thank you for joining us and best of luck to you and your teams in hopefully the first of many fantasy football playoff weeks. Have a great week, and we'll catch you next time.
This was the IDP After Show.